When you look at the inner workings of an antique pocket watch, it's genuinely mesmerizing.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got all these tiny metal cogs, the springs, the little gears, and they all do exactly what they're supposed to do every single time.
Right.
A large gear turns a small gear. It is just pure, predictable engineering.
It's the ultimate command and control system, really. I mean, force applied at point A creates an exact, measurable result at point B.
Yeah.
Structural engineering at its finest.
But then imagine taking one of those little metal cogs and replacing it with something alive.
Oh, boy.
Right, something that has moods or ambition or just, really bad headache that day.
Yeah, the gears jam pretty quickly.
Exactly. The whole system stutters.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are so glad to have you, the learner, here with us.
Hmm.
Because today we're opening up an academic text on employer-employee relations, specifically looking at excerpts from MMPC-002 Block 4.
It's a fascinating text. It really is. We're going to look at what happens when human beings replace those metal cogs. We are going to shortcut your way to understanding how organizations shifted away from that rigid, watch-like environment.
Right, and how they actually started managing the psychological friction of an empowered workforce.
Yeah.
Because our mission today is mapping the architecture of industrial democracy.
Mm.
I mean, we like to think of our organizations as these perfectly designed machines.
Sure.
But relying purely on structural engineering fails when you're dealing with living, breathing people. Management absolutely had to evolve from a physical discipline to a psychological one.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with why the old model broke down so spectacularly in the first place.
Good place to start.
For a long time, traditional management relied entirely on, span of control and chain of command. The text describes these incredibly dehumanized, boring workplaces.
Yeah, where the only goal was direction and strict supervision.
Right. And there's a quote in the source material from Clarence Francis. He was the former chairman of General Food Corporation that anchors this perfectly.
Oh, I love this quote.
He said, "You can buy a man's time. You can buy a man's physical presence at a given place. You can even buy a measured number of skilled muscular motion per day or per hour.
Wow.
But you cannot buy enthusiasm, initiative, loyalty. You have to earn all these things."
The phrase measured number of skilled muscular motion is, well, it's chilling, honestly.
It really frames the worker as just a biological machine.
Completely. But the modern workplace doesn't need basic muscular motion anymore.
No.
It's like the difference between renting a robot and hiring a human. You can program a robot for measured muscular motion, but humans need the software of autonomy and purpose to run properly.
Oh, I like that analogy. Or, to put it another way, it's the difference between running a centrally planned algorithm versus a neural network.
Right.
In a rigidly planned algorithm, all the processing happens at the top. The nodes just execute commands. But today's knowledge workers are like a neural network.
Yeah, the outer nodes have to process their own data. They have to make local decisions and adapt on the fly. Otherwise, the whole system just bottlenecks.
Exactly. And the text points out that today's workers simply won't tolerate a suffocating atmosphere. They need information, autonomy, and an actual challenge.
And we can ground that shift in the behavioral science the text provides, too. I mean, the breakdown of the do what I say model wasn't just a sudden cultural whim.
Right, it wasn't just a trend.
No, it was a psychological inevitability. The text outlines several foundational theories, like Maslow's self-actualization and McGregor's theory Y, but two in particular, Herzberg's two-factor theory and Adams' equity theory, really explain the mechanics of the shift.
So Herzberg is the one that completely flips common sense on its head, right?
Yeah.
The idea that paying someone a good salary and giving them a safe desk doesn't actually make them want to work harder.
It's completely counterintuitive, but the data backs it up. Herzberg categorized things like basic pay, job security, and working conditions as mere hygiene factors.
Hygiene factors.
Right. Their presence doesn't generate motivation. It just prevents the worker from being totally miserable or, actively sabotaging the process. To actually generate enthusiasm, to earn what Clarence Francis was talking about, you need a second set of variables, the motivators.
Which are things like autonomy, the feeling of achievement, the variety of the work itself.
Exactly. And when you combine that with Adams' equity theory, the old command and control system completely shatters.
Because equity theory is all about parity and perceived fairness.
Yes. If I'm assembling the exact same amount of microchips as the person next to me, but management treats them with more autonomy or gives them a better title,
your motivation drops to zero?
To zero. It doesn't matter if my baseline hygiene factors are met. The perceived unfairness breaks the psychological contract.
What's fascinating here is that true empowerment, the solution to these roadblocks, isn't just a motivational speech
No, definitely not.
or a manager handing out high fives. According to the research, true empowerment is a literal structural transfer of power. It's passing authority down to the lowest possible levels in the hierarchy.
And the sources are highly specific on the mechanics of that transfer. You can't just tell an employee, hey, you're empowered now.
Right. Good luck.
You have to hand over 4 tangible pillars: information, knowledge, power, and rewards.
Okay, break those down for me.
So information means giving them the raw data, quality metrics, customer feedback. Knowledge means educating them on the broader business context so they can actually interpret that data.
Makes sense.
Power is the authority to act on their interpretations without asking for permission.
Yeah.
And rewards means their compensation is tied directly to the business results of those actions.
Wow.
If you withhold even one of those 4 pillars, you're just running a facade.
And we see the actual execution of this in the Indian corporate examples provided in the text. Look at Wipro Corporation.
Yeah, great example.
They didn't just tell their employees to feel empowered. They structurally expanded to over 130 autonomous empowered teams.
Right. Or Reliance, where divisional heads are handed the authority to run their specific divisions as if they were the managing directors of their own independent companies.
That's huge. They're given the data, the authority, and the financial incentives to operate without that command and control leash.
Exactly.
So we've established that the neural network needs autonomy. But when you give these outer nodes a voice and you hand over actual power, what happens when they speak up?
Well, often they use that voice to optimize the system.
Right. The text points to quality circles as a prime mechanism for this, originating in the USA and famously revolutionizing Japanese manufacturing.
Yeah. A quality circle is a group of 8 to 10 employees who meet regularly, like weekly or monthly, to solve quality problems.
But the mechanism of a quality circle is often misunderstood, isn't it?
Oh, totally. You can't just put 8 frustrated line workers in a conference room, lock the door, and expect a strategic breakthrough.
Right, that's just a venting session.
Exactly. The text emphasizes that management must heavily invest in teaching these employees group communication skills, quality strategies, rigorous problem analysis techniques. The structural transfer of power requires a structural transfer of education.
That is the highly productive side of giving employees a voice. But we have to look at the other side of the coin.
Oh,
Sometimes when people speak up, it's just to complain. And the text spends a lot of time dissecting the dark side of employee voice. Grievances.
yes. Unresolved grievances are described as the rust, which corrodes the very fabric of the organization.
Ouch. And the terminology here is strict. Any manager needs to understand the escalation. It begins with dissatisfaction, which is any unrest that disturbs an employee. And crucially, it might be entirely unspoken.
Right, just brewing under the surface.
Exactly. When that dissatisfaction is finally verbalized or written down and brought to a supervisor, it graduates to a complaint.
And if that complaint is ignored or poorly handled, it crystallizes into a formal grievance. This is a drastic, formal step presented to management or a union.
Now, the text categorizes these grievances into 3 forms: factual, imaginary, and disguised.
Right.
Factual is straightforward. Management promised a 5% wage hike and only delivered 3%. The contract was breached.
Yeah, clear cut.
But here's where it gets really interesting. How does a manager possibly resolve an imaginary or disguised grievance?
That's the tricky part.
Because the text defines a disguised grievance as personal pressure like extreme stress from family or friends manifesting as anger at work.
Yeah.
Let's say an employee is furious and files a complaint because a coworker got a slightly newer chair, but the root cause is actually their family stress.
Right.
That seems structurally dangerous for a manager to get involved in. If a supervisor starts prying into a worker's family life to solve a dispute about a chair, HR is going to have a heart attack.
Oh, absolutely.
Isn't that crossing a massive professional boundary?
Well, it's a very real operational trap, and it's why many managers dismiss non-factual grievances entirely. They think, well, the chair is identical, the anger is irrational, therefore this is not my problem.
Exactly.
But the academic text isn't suggesting the manager plays therapist or pries into the employee's marriage.
Okay.
It is suggesting the manager must recognize the root causality so they don't waste company resources trying to build a better chair. The text is clear. Even if a grievance is imaginary or disguised, management must clear the fog.
Because the damage to the company is happening regardless of the cause.
Precisely. The effects are brutally real. An unresolved grievance, even a highly irrational one, leads directly to low quality of production, high absenteeism, and ruined machinery.
Wait, ruined machinery.
Yeah, because the worker's mind is completely detached from the physical task. The manager doesn't have to solve the employee's personal life, but they do have to systematically de-escalate the localized tension, because it directly hits the organizational health.
But fixing individual gripes about chairs or isolated localized tension is essentially playing whack-a-mole.
Totally.
If you really want to stop systemic grievances before they start, you have to change who makes the rules in the first place. You have to zoom out from the micro to the macro.
Yes. This brings us to structural power sharing at scale. Workers' participation in management, or WPM in India. How do companies let workers make actual business decisions?
WPM is where we move from merely listening to employees to actually sharing the steering wheel. It takes several progressive forms.
Okay.
It starts with collective bargaining, moves up to works councils, evolves into joint management councils, and reaches its apex with actual worker representation on the board of directors.
And the history of this in India is a fascinating case study in the friction between culture and legislation.
Oh, it really is.
Because it started entirely voluntarily and quite early. We're talking about informal joint consultation at places like Tisco, the Tata Iron and Steel Company in the 1920s.
Yeah.
Delhi Cloth Mills actually had an elected worker representative on their board of directors all the way back in 1938.
But then the state decided to mandate what had been voluntary. There was this massive, decades-long legislative push.
The Industrial Disputes Act of 1947 provided a legal framework for works committees.
Yeah.
In 1975, they actually amended the Constitution, inserting Section 43A to legally secure worker participation.
Wow.
There was even a highly contentious bill introduced in the Rajya Sabha in 1990, attempting to strictly mandate participation at all levels. And it ended up sitting stalled for over a decade.
So, despite the full weight of the Constitution and decades of legal frameworks, the text points out that in India, these schemes largely failed.
It did.
And the reasons why are incredibly revealing. It wasn't a failure of the law's text, it was a failure of psychology.
Yeah.
You had rigid attitudes, vague laws, half-hearted implementation from management who fundamentally hated losing their hard-earned authority.
Yep.
But more surprisingly, there was an intense suspicion from the trade union leaders themselves.
Which makes sense if you put yourself in the shoes of a mid-century trade union leader. I mean, your entire operational mandate, your entire identity is built on an adversarial relationship with management.
Right, you exist to fight them.
Exactly. Suddenly, management, under pressure from the government, opens the door and says, hey, come sit on our board and help us make operational decisions.
You're immediately going to assume it's a trap.
You are. A trap designed to co-opt the union and fragment your authority over the workers. The legal framework existed, but the necessary mutual trust was entirely absent.
Which makes the glaring exception to this failure so important to study. Tisco, the same company that experimented with this in the 1920s, has been operating a highly successful WPM system since 1957.
Yeah, they built a three-tier system. Joint departmental councils at the base, joint worker councils reviewing them.
And the metrics are staggering. Over 70% of the suggestions generated by this system are actually implemented by management.
And the sources isolate the specific variables of Tisco's success. None of them rely on government mandates.
Interesting.
First, they had strong, unwavering management support right from the beginning. Second, they operated with a single, unified union, drastically reducing the political friction. But the third and most critical variable was education. Tisco actually trained their workers for these give-and-take sessions.
They didn't just give them a seat at the table. They taught them how to read the complex financial menu.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? The government has been trying to force this via legislation since 1947, but the standout success Tisco was largely voluntary. Is this proof that you simply cannot legislate mutual trust?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yeah, that is the core takeaway of the text's Indian case study. WPM is just an empty bureaucratic shell without the necessary psychological prerequisites.
Huh.
A government can pass a law requiring a council to meet on the first Tuesday of every month, but a government cannot legislate a manager's willingness to genuinely listen.
Right.
And you certainly cannot legislate the rigorous operational education required for workers to understand complex corporate strategy. Without that education, the text notes that these mandated councils devolved into petty arguments over tea, towels, and toilets.
Towels and toilets instead of actual business strategy. But if India's approach was a messy mix of voluntary successes and legislative struggles, It makes you wonder how other nations tackled the exact same problem. Did anyone figure out how to structurally mandate this kind of industrial democracy without it devolving into arguments about towels?
Well, the text provides two radical global models that engineered power sharing directly into their economic DNA,
Yeah.
Germany and the former Yugoslavia.
And as a quick note for you, the learner, we are looking at these strictly through the lens of structural business systems.
Yes.
We are setting aside the broader political ideologies of the era to focus purely on the mechanics of power. Let's start with Germany's system of Mitbestimmung, or co-determination. This isn't just an HR policy, it is baked into their corporate law.
Yeah. The German model functionally splits the traditional corporate board in two.
Hmm?
By law, they operate a two-tier board system.
Okay.
At the highest level, you have the supervisory board. This entity handles major macro-level strategic decisions, massive capital investments, opening new facilities or plant closures.
Right.
The law mandates parity representation on this board, meaning the shareholders and the workers hold an equal number of seats. They sit across from each other to vote on the macro direction.
And below that, you have the management board, which handles the actual day-to-day operations and executes the strategy handed down by the supervisory board.
Exactly. But the democratization doesn't stop at the boardroom. Down on the shop floor, they have works councils.
These are exclusive bodies made up entirely of employees, right?
Yeah.
Elected by secret ballot.
Yes. And they aren't just an advisory committee that management can ignore. They have actual legal co-determination rights. Management cannot unilaterally change working hours, alter welfare plans, or even execute certain dismissals without the agreement of the Works Council.
Wow. It creates a system of forced collaboration. The law specifically mandates that management and the Works Council must work together in a spirit of mutual trust.
Right. By giving the workers a literal veto power over day-to-day operational impacts and an equal vote on macro strategy, the German system forces both sides to the negotiating table monthly.
Effectively institutionalizing the resolution of disputes before they ever result in a strike.
Exactly. It's a deeply institutionalized balance of power.
But if you want to look at a truly radical departure from the traditional pyramid of ownership, the text points us to the system of social self-management in Yugoslavia, which was initiated in 1949.
Yeah, this was specifically designed as a structural departure from the highly bureaucratic, centrally planned Russian state model.
And the Yugoslavian model fundamentally redefined ownership. The enterprise isn't owned by private shareholders, nor is it owned by the state bureaucracy.
Right, it's owned by society at large, but it is managed entirely by the workers' collective. The concept was that the people who physically create the wealth are the only ones who have the right to manage the mechanism of that wealth creation.
It is like taking the traditional corporate pyramid, flipping it completely upside down, and balancing it on its tip.
It really is.
The supreme authority in a Yugoslavian enterprise wasn't a CEO, it was the Workers' Council, made up of 15 to 120 elected employees.
And this council is responsible for approving financial statements, setting massive operational policies. They, in turn, elect a management board to act as their executive organ.
The mechanism of how they handled executive leadership is the most striking difference. The workers are essentially the board of directors.
Yeah.
When they need a chief executive, known as the director, the Workers' Council puts out an open advertisement. They interview the candidates, they set the operational metrics, and they hire the director.
And if that director is incompetent, the workers can simply vote to fire them.
The people at the bottom of the traditional pyramid hold the ultimate authority over the person at the top.
It's wild. Plus, the text notes there was a People's Committee of Local Citizens that provided an external safety net.
Right.
They could step in if the company was mismanaged to the point that it couldn't pay minimum wage.
This raises an important question. How does this radical inversion of power impact the friction we talked about earlier?
Well, the text points out that in the Yugoslavian model, this structural democratization effectively prevented the exploitation of workers. It instilled a massive, localized sense of belonging.
Because the workers weren't fighting management, they were management.
Exactly. As a result, industrial conflicts and strikes were significantly reduced compared to the rest of Europe during that same period.
It is an incredible way to rethink how we organize human effort. So, to recap this journey for you, the learner, we started by dismantling the antique pocket watch. We looked at the absolute psychological necessity of moving beyond just buying a worker's muscular motion.
Right, genuinely earning their mental involvement through autonomy.
We saw how that plays out on the ground, the massive potential of quality circles, and the very real danger of ignoring the root cause of a disguised grievance.
Yeah.
And finally, we examined how India, Germany, and Yugoslavia attempted to institutionalize that worker power at scale, proving that while you can build the legislative architecture, you still have to relentlessly cultivate the trust and education to make it work.
The evolution from a cog in a machine to a node in a neural network is ongoing. And this matters to you today, whether you're a manager trying to decode a confusing complaint from your team or an employee seeking more structural autonomy.
Right.
Understanding the true architecture of empowerment, knowing that it absolutely requires the transfer of information, knowledge, power, and rewards, is the ultimate shortcut to diagnosing the health of your own workplace.
But I want to leave you with a brand new thought to mull over, building on everything we've just unpacked. We've spent this entire time talking about empowering the physical shop floor.
Yeah, face-to-face councils.
Right, sitting across the table in parity board meetings. But the modern world is radically shifting toward fully remote, decentralized, global freelance workforces. What does workers' participation in management look like tomorrow?
Oh, that's a great question.
If there is no physical shop floor and your coworkers are just avatars on a screen spread across 12 different time zones, how will the digital generation build their own works councils?
Will we see decentralized autonomous organizations replace the Yugoslavian Workers' Council?
It makes you wonder. Because when you replace metal cogs with complex human beings, you don't just have a machine anymore, you have an ecosystem. And ecosystems must adapt to survive. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.